When it comes to muscle cars, Ford's legacy is undeniable. But what often gets forgotten is that Ford didn't stop at Mustangs and Torinos. They also built pickup trucks with serious power and attitude. These weren't just workhorses, they were street brawlers with beds, built for drivers who wanted muscle car performance with pickup utility. Here are 9 incredible Ford-built super pickup trucks that once roared and then disappeared into the dust.
Dear viewer, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Thanks for your support.
Number 9, the 1956 Ford F100 Big Window V8 Custom Cab. A stylish, powerful, and often overlooked gem of 1950s American truck design. In the golden era of chrome and curves, when American automakers were dressing even their trucks like show cars, Ford delivered one of the most distinctive pickups of the decade, the 1956 Ford EU F100 Big Window Custom Cab. It was more than just a workhorse, it was an artful blend of style and substance. With its unique wraparound rear glass, custom cab trim, and available Y-block V8, the 1956 model stood out like a rebel in a pressed flannel shirt. Yet despite its flair, this model was a one-year-only design, making it rare even then. And today, it's often overshadowed by both earlier post-war trucks and the sleeker F-Series of the late 1960s and beyond. Ford had introduced its second-generation F-Series in 1953, renaming the old F1 to F100 and ushering in a new era of slightly more civilized pickups. The 53 to 56 F100s were still work trucks at heart, but they were increasingly aimed at owner-operators, small business owners, ranchers, and suburbanites who wanted style with utility. The 1956 model marked the final year of this generation and was in many ways its stylistic and engineering high point. What set the 1956 Ford F100 apart was its visual presence. Key design features: 1 year only. Front end. The vertical wraparound grille was taller and more upright than the previous 3 years, giving it a bolder, more aggressive face. The big window cab. Offered as an option, the large curved rear window was a radical departure from the tiny flat rear glass seen in most trucks of the era. It offered improved visibility and added a unique upscale flair. Sleek bed and fenders. Smooth steel bedsides and integrated fender lines gave it a modern, custom rod appearance, decades ahead of its time. Available two-tone paint. Especially in custom cab trim, the F100 could be ordered with stylish color combinations and stainless trim. Badging and chrome accents. Custom cab models had extra chrome, more polished interiors, and a dressier, suburban-friendly look. This wasn't just a truck, it was a styling statement, a fusion of function and form at a time when trucks were evolving from tools into lifestyle vehicles. In 1956, Ford offered multiple engine options for the F100, but the most desirable was the 272 cubic inch Y-block V8, an engine that made the F100 one of the quickest trucks of its time. 1956 F100 V8 specs: 272 cubic inch Y-block V8, 167 horsepower and 260 pound-feet of torque. Optional 3-speed automatic or 3/4 speed manual. Optional overdrive for better highway cruising. Though it was technically a work vehicle, the F100 V8 had serious street potential. With mild tuning, headers, and dual exhaust, it could be turned into a legitimate hot rod, and many were. That made it popular with young customizers and drag racers in the 1950s years that followed. The custom cab interior was upscale for 1956, two-tone seat upholstery and door panels, additional insulation and sound deadening, sun visors, armrests, and a cigar lighter, luxury items in a truck. Optional heater, our defroster, and AM radio. Big, bold instrument cluster with airplane-style gauges. This wasn't a stripped-down farm truck anymore. Ford knew its buyers were changing, and they responded by giving the F100 the comforts of a car with the strength of a truck. By modern standards, the 1956 F100 is a handful, but for the time, it was among the best-handling full-size trucks. Ride quality was stiff but predictable. Steering was heavy and slow, especially without power assist. Braking required planning ahead. All drums, no ABS. But with the V8, it could cruise at 70 miles per hour and get there fast enough to impress. It was one of the first trucks that didn't feel like a penalty box behind the wheel. In many ways, the 56 F100 was the first pickup you could take to work, then cruise to the diner on Saturday night without swapping vehicles. Despite its many strengths, the 1956 F100 custom cab big window had a few strikes against it. It was a one-year-only design, so replacement parts and production familiarity were limited. Ford quickly moved on to a new body style in 1957 with slab-sided styling and updated suspension. Later F-Series models, especially the 1967-72 trucks, became more widely known and produced in larger numbers. As time passed, the 56 became a rarity, respected by collectors, but unknown to the general public. Its iconic look and hot rod-ready setup made it a customizer's favorite, which ironically hurt its originality in the collector market. Many were chopped, channeled, and turned into show trucks, making survivors scarce. Number 8, the 1965 Ford F100 Twin IBeam V8, a truck that blended innovation, ruggedness, and classic style, yet somehow faded into obscurity beneath the weight of later models. By 1965, Ford was no longer simply building tools for farmers and tradesmen. It was creating durable, drivable, and now more comfortable trucks that were meant to live in towns, cities, and highways, not just backwoods and dirt roads. The 1965 F100 wasn't just a refresh, it marked a technological and design turning point in Ford's pickup history. The biggest headline? Ford's introduction of the revolutionary twin IBeam front suspension, a system that promised a smoother ride without sacrificing rugged durability. Combine that with the available V8 powertrain, timeless styling, and bulletproof construction, and the 1965 F100 was a true game-changer. But for all its strengths, the 1965 model would later be overshadowed by the slicker trucks of the 1970s, making it one of the most underappreciated pickups in Ford's long lineage. In the mid-1960s, the American pickup was undergoing a transformation. Buyers wanted smoother rides, not just raw strength. More trucks were being used for recreation, commuting, and family errands, not just farm chores. Chevrolet had just released its own independent front suspension, which set a new benchmark. Ford responded in 1965, not with a soft compromise, but with a bold mechanical innovation, the twin IBeam suspension system. The twin IBeam suspension was Ford's signature engineering move in 1965, and it would become a staple of their trucks for the next 3 decades. How it worked. Instead of a solid front axle, the suspension used 2 long, forged I-beams, each connected to a wheel and pivoting independently. This allowed each front wheel to move independently over bumps and rough roads, improving ride quality and comfort. The setup was incredibly durable, as the massive beams could take hard use in tough conditions. Pros: smoother highway ride than solid axle competitors. Maintained ruggedness for heavy-duty work. Simple to service, with fewer moving parts than modern IFS. Cons: camber changes during suspension movement led to odd tire wear. Not as sharp in handling as a true independent suspension. Sometimes harsh on washboard dirt roads. But in 1965, it was a massive leap forward, and Ford advertised it aggressively, calling it the greatest advance in pickup suspension in 60 years. The 1965 Ford F100 retained the basic boxy shape of the 4th-generation trucks, 1961 to 66, but it had cleaner lines and a more modern look than earlier models. Key visual elements: a clean horizontal grille with an egg crate pattern, simple but strong body lines along the flanks, a sturdy steel bed, available in style side or flare side, optional 2-tone paint, and custom cab trim. It was a truck that looked right at home on a job site or parked in front of a suburban ranch house. It had style without being flashy and strength without excess bulk. Under the hood, the 1965 F100 could be had with a range of engines, but the most desirable was the 352 cubic inch FE Series V8. Engine specs for the 352 V8: 208 to 208 horsepower, 0.315 pound-feet of torque, 2-barrel carburetor, paired with 3-speed manual, 4-speed manual, or optional automatic transmission. This was the same basic engine family used in Ford's full-size Galaxy and even in police interceptors, so it brought genuine performance to the pickup world. For buyers who needed torque for towing and hauling, or just like the sound of a big block under the hood, the F100 V8 delivered. While still relatively basic by today's standards, the 1965 F100 offered real steps forward in comfort and usability. Interior features included larger, more legible gauges, a more padded seat and dash on higher trims, optional heater, just defroster, and AM radio, durable vinyl upholstery and rubber floor mats, improved sound, deadening for a quieter ride. Buyers who stepped up to the custom cab got more brightwork, nicer trim, and a less bare-bones experience. It was a sign that Ford understood the truck was becoming a daily driver, not just a daily beater. Number 7, the 1968 Ford Ranchero GT 428 Cobra Jet, a wild fusion of muscle car and pickup that became one of the fastest, rarest, and most misunderstood trucks in American automotive history. In the high-octane years of the late 1960s, every American automaker was stuffing massive engines into anything that could roll. Ford, already deep into Mustang and Torino performance territory, decided to take it a step further. What if a muscle car could haul lumber? Enter the 1968 Ford Ranchero GT 428 Cobra Jet. Not a truck in the traditional sense, but not quite a car either. It was a radical mix of utility and speed, a hauler with hood scoops, a pickup that could outrun most sports cars. It was, for a fleeting moment, the fastest factory truck Ford had ever made, but almost no one remembers it. Why? Let's break down this bizarre, beautiful anomaly. First, we need to understand the Ranchero platform. Introduced in 1957, the Ranchero was a response to Chevrolet's car-truck hybrid ambitions. Unlike traditional body-on-frame pickups, the Ranchero was car-based, sharing its underpinnings with full-size Fords and later mid-size Fairlanes and Torinos. It was marketed not to farmers, but to suburban cowboys, buyers who wanted style and practicality in one vehicle. By the late 60s, as muscle mania swept the nation, the Ranchero began morphing into a high-performance vehicle with a bed. The 1968 model represented the peak of that transformation. In 1968, the Ranchero's body was redesigned, now sharing much of its design and engineering with the newly launched Ford Torino. The Torino was Ford's answer to the Chevelle SS and Plymouth GTX, stylish, mid-sized, and built for muscle. So naturally, the Ranchero borrowed Torino's aggressive looks, from its Coke bottle curves to quad headlights and sporty trim. The Ranchero GT trim level added bucket seats, performance badging, unique exterior styling, and upgraded suspension. But the GT wasn't just cosmetic, because lurking under the hood was Ford's most dangerous engine, the 428 Cobra Jet. The 428 Cobra Jet V8 wasn't just another big block. It was a drag strip-ready monster built for one reason: win races. Specs 4, 28 cubic inches, 7.0 liters. Official rating, 335 horsepower, gross. But in reality, it made well over 400 horsepower, 440 plus pound-feet of torque, 10.6 to 1 compression, on paper, though actual specs varied. Massive Holley 735 CFM 4-barrel carb. Heavy-duty internals, nodular crank, special pistons, large ports. Ram air induction on select models. Ford deliberately underrated the Cobra Jet for insurance reasons, but in the real world it could push a Torino or Ranchero through the quarter mile in the mid-13 seconds, faster than a 396 Chevelle or a 440 Roadrunner. Putting this engine into a Ranchero created a truly unhinged Frankenstein, a two-seat utility coupe with muscle car reflexes and big rig grunt. Thanks to the 428 Cobra Jet, the 1968 Ranchero GT became Ford's fastest pickup-based vehicle of the entire muscle car era, 0 to 60 miles per hour in under 6 seconds quarter mile, in 13.5 seconds with slick's top speed over 130 miles per hour. Factory dual exhaust, HD suspension, and 9-inch rear axle. The result? A pickup that could embarrass Mustangs at stoplights, haul bags of cement, and cruise at 100+ miles per hour, all while turning heads at the gas station. But it also had drawbacks: front-heavy handling, limited rear traction due to light bed, questionable brakes for the power, extremely thirsty fuel consumption. In other words, it was pure, glorious muscle car excess with a tailgate. Here's the kicker. Ford barely made any. Exact production numbers for 428 equipped Rancheros are unclear, but experts estimate that fewer than 1,000 Ranchero GTs received the Cobra jet in 1968. Many were ordered through the drag pack or special performance options not widely advertised. Why so few? The Ranchero was never as popular as the El Camino, which had a stronger Chevrolet muscle pedigree. Buyers looking for Cobra jet muscle usually chose Torinos, Mustangs, or Fairlanes, not a truck hybrid. Insurance and emissions pressures were already looming in 1968, and this vehicle was in the crosshairs. The 428 CJ Ranchero was a niche machine for hot rodders, street racers, or guys who wanted to blow off steam on weekends and haul drywall on Monday. Number 6, the 1978 Ford F-150 Lariat with the 460 V8, a big block behemoth that embodied the last swaggering gasp of pre-oil crisis excess in American truck design. By 1978, the American pickup had transformed. No longer just a tool for farmers or blue-collar contractors, it was becoming something else. A symbol of personal freedom, of style, even luxury. Ford was at the forefront of this change, and its flagship was the F-150 Lariat. Stuffed with comfort features and crowned with a monstrous 460 cubic inch V8, the 1978 F-150 Lariat was Ford's most powerful, most luxurious, full-size truck ever built to that point. It didn't just haul, it hauled in style and roared while doing it, but its timing was terrible. It hit the streets just in time for the second oil crisis to crush anything with double-digit fuel consumption. The Lariat 460 V8 was here and gone in a flash. Let's dive into the truck that defined late 70s truck indulgence. To understand the 1978 F-150 Lariat, you have to understand where America was at that moment. The pickup market was evolving. People wanted comfort along with capability. Ford had just created the F-150 in 1975 as a response to emissions regulations that affected 3/4 ton and heavier trucks. The F-150 was a light-duty truck, but it was big, solid, and smoother riding, perfect for consumers shifting away from Spartan work trucks. By 1978, Ford launched the Lariat trim, aiming squarely at people who wanted a truck with the flair of a Lincoln and the muscle of a Mustang. The Lariat wasn't a working man's beater. It was a statement wrapped in chrome, crushed velour, and torque. The 1978 Ford F-150 Lariat was decked out with style elements that rivaled sedans of the day. Exterior: two-tone paint options, chrome bumpers and mirrors, body side moldings and Lariat badging, polished aluminum or styled steel wheels. Interior: deep pile carpet, simulated wood grain dash and trim, cloth or vinyl bench seat with optional captain's chairs, air conditioning, AM/FM stereo, and tilt wheel. Rare luxuries in a truck at the time. This was a cowboy Cadillac, plain and simple. It brought personal luxury into the cab of a full-size Ford for the first time, and that's where the engine comes in. The star of the show was the optional 385 series 460 cubic inch V8, one of the largest displacement engines ever dropped into a Ford pickup. Specs: displacement, 460 cubic inches, 7.5 liters. Horsepower net, approximately 239 horsepower at 580 revolutions per minute, 4,000 RPM. Torque, approximately 385 pound-feet at 2,000 RPM. 4-barrel carburetor, cast iron block and heads, mated to the rugged C6 3-speed automatic transmission. Let's not sugarcoat it. This thing was a torque monster. It pulled boats, trailers, and tree stumps without breaking a sweat. Flooring the gas felt like hitting warp speed, briefly. But the flip side? The fuel economy was horrendous, 0.8 to 10 miles per gallon under the best conditions. Towing? You were lucky to see 6 miles per gallon. Fuel tank capacity, approximately 20 gallons equals very expensive fill-ups, even in 1978. Still, for a certain kind of buyer, ranchers, show-offs, weekend warriors, it didn't matter. It was about power, prestige, and presence. This wasn't a street rod, but it had muscle, 0 to 60 in around 10 to 11 seconds. Amazing for a 5,000-plus pound truck. Excellent towing capacity, over 8,000 pounds with the right axle ratio. Smooth ride thanks to twin IBeam front suspension. Reliable C6 automatic and Ford 9-inch rear axle. But it was no sports car. Wallowy handling, mushy brakes, soft suspension tuned for comfort, not cornering. In essence, it drove like a sofa with an engine the size of a bathtub. And for many buyers, that was perfect. The timing couldn't have been worse. In 1979, the second energy crisis caused fuel prices to spike and availability to drop. Suddenly, vehicles like the 460-powered Lariat became toxic to both consumers and regulators. CAFE standards began pressuring automakers to shrink engines or kill them entirely. Emissions controls choked performance further, and buyers began shifting toward compact imports and V6-powered domestics. By 1980, Ford phased out the 460 in light-duty trucks, though it lingered in the heavy-duty F250/F350 for a while longer. The Lariat survived, but its excessive performance personality was dead. The big block era was over. Number 5, the 1984 Ford Ranger GT, a forgotten attempt to blend muscle and mini-truck utility in a compact, stripe-clad package. By the early 1980s, America's automotive landscape was shifting. The gas crises of the previous decade had fundamentally altered buyer priorities, and the compact truck was booming. Cheap, reliable, and surprisingly practical, small pickups from Toyota, Nissan, and Mazda dominated sales. Ford wanted in, and in 1983 it introduced the Ranger, its first compact pickup engineered entirely in-house. Prior to that, the Courier had been a rebadged Mazda. But in 1984, Ford tried something different. It gave the Ranger a dose of attitude. Enter the 1984 Ford Ranger GT, a short-lived sport truck that combined a bold look, athletic suspension, and a dose of driver-focused marketing. But despite its potential, it vanished quickly, and now lingers as one of the most overlooked American compact performance trucks of the era. In the early 80s, compact pickups were exploding in popularity, particularly among younger buyers. Imports like the Toyota pickup and Datsun 720 were offering reliability and fuel economy. GM countered with the Chevy S10, while Ford's Ranger debuted in 1983 to positive reviews. The Ranger was praised for smooth ride, American-built toughness, versatile configurations. But Ford wanted to stand out. They weren't just chasing work truck buyers, they wanted driving enthusiasts. So for 1984, Ford launched the Ranger GT, a sport version designed to inject some performance flair into the segment. The 1984 Ranger GT stood out, visually at least. Ford dressed it up with bold, unmistakable cues, color-keyed bumpers and grille, rally-style stripes and GT decals on the doors and tailgate, blackout trim pieces, low-profile steel wheels or styled aluminum options, flared wheel arches and fog lights on some models, bucket seats and a floor-mounted shifter inside. It looked the part, aggressive without being absurd. For a compact truck in the mid-1980s, it was practically loud. In an era when most trucks were beige and boxy, the Ranger GT was youthful, bold, and fun, a true rarity among American compacts. Here's where things get interesting, and a little disappointing. Under the hood, the Ranger GT didn't get anything revolutionary. Instead, it offered a 2.8-liter Cologne 56, the same engine used in the Mustang II and Ford Capri. Specs Dutch 2.8-liter V6, 115 horsepower at approximately 4,600 RPM, 150 pound-feet of torque at 360 degrees, 2,600 RPM, 5-speed manual or 3-speed automatic transmission, rear-wheel drive only. It wasn't fast. In fact, 0 to 60 came in at about 11 to 12 seconds. But it was torquey, reliable, and paired well with the GT's suspension tweaks. The Ranger GT had heavy-duty shocks and springs, stiffer anti-roll bars, lower stance, better cornering than any other compact truck Ford sold. It wasn't a muscle truck, but it was fun to drive, with a planted feel and crisp handling that made it more than just an appearance package. The inside of the Ranger GT was more than a bench seat and a rubber mat. Ford gave it features aimed at younger buyers: bucket seats with optional two-tone cloth, center console, full-gauge cluster with tachometer, tilt steering and sport wheel, optional air conditioning, stereo with cassette, and cruise control. It was far from luxurious, but compared to the stripped-down base models, it felt sporty and driver-focused, almost like a small GT car in pickup form. Despite the effort, the Ranger GT didn't take off in sales. Why? The performance wasn't mind-blowing. It looked fast, but wasn't. Gas prices had stabilized, and buyers wanted practicality, not personality. It was priced higher than the base Ranger, which turned off value-conscious truck shoppers. Most compact truck buyers didn't care about stripes and suspension. They cared about hauling mulch or getting to work. In a way, the Ranger GT was ahead of its time. The idea of a sport truck, a performance-themed pickup for enthusiasts, would explode in the 1990s, with the GMC Cyclone, Ford Lightning, and Toyota X-Runner. But in 1984, few people were ready for the concept. As a result, the GT was quietly dropped after a few years. Ford never marketed it hard, and few even knew it existed. Number 4, the 1982 Ford Courier Sport. The last gasp of Ford's imported mini-truck before the homegrown Ranger took over. In the early 1980s, compact pickups were no longer novelties. They were essential vehicles for cost-conscious drivers, small business owners, and younger buyers who wanted utility without the bulk of a full-size truck. Japanese brands dominated this field with reliability, efficiency, and just enough flair. Ford didn't have its own compact truck ready yet, so they did what many American automakers did at the time. They turned to Japan. Their answer was the Ford Courier, a rebadged Mazda B-Series truck that quietly carried Ford's badge throughout the 1970s and into the early 80s. But in its final year, 1982, Ford tried to spice things up with one last hurrah, the Courier Sport. It wasn't a muscle truck, but it offered style, sport cues, and driving fun in a tiny rear-wheel drive package, a sort of preview of what the Ford Ranger would soon bring. The Ford Courier was introduced in 1972. During a moment of intense change in the U.S. auto market, rising gas prices made compact vehicles appealing. The Japanese were building compact pickups like the Toyota Hilux, Datsun 620, and Mazda B1600. Tough, small, and efficient. Ford lacked a domestic small truck, so they partnered with Mazda, rebadging the B-Series as the Ford Courier. The Courier was assembled in Japan and shipped to the U.S., where it filled the gap beneath the F-100. Throughout the 1970s, it remained a consistent seller for Ford, never dominant, but reliable. However, by the early 1980s, Ford realized they needed a homegrown replacement, one that could match the competition more closely. That vehicle would become the 1983 Ford Ranger. But in 1982, Ford gave the Courier a swan song, a sport version with flair and driver focus. The 1982 Courier Sport was immediately recognizable thanks to its unique aesthetic packaging. Bold side stripes with sport decals, color-keyed grille and mirrors, optional chrome wheels and trim accents, sporty bucket seats inside, special badging and blackout trim options. The Courier Sport gave off the impression of speed and performance, even though it was still relatively mild under the hood. It was designed to appeal to younger buyers who liked the idea of a mini muscle truck, or at least something that looked the part. Under the hood, the Courier Sport didn't deliver tire-smoking performance, but it wasn't slow either. Engine options for 1982 included 2.0-liter SOHC 4-cylinder, standard, 2.3-liter SOHC 4-cylinder, optional, shared with Pinto, Mustang Nur 2. Power output ranged from 74 to 88 horsepower, depending on the engine and emissions package. Transmission options: 4-speed manual, 5-speed manual, optional on higher trims, 3-speed automatic, rare on sport models. The Courier Sport benefited from its lightweight build, just under 2,600 pounds, rear-wheel drive, and a simple but responsive suspension setup. It was no street racer, but it handled decently, could be easily modified, and delivered better than average fuel economy. In its time, it was considered quick enough to be fun, especially when equipped with the 5-speed and 2.3-liter engine. The interior of the Courier Sport was a step up from the base model: bucket seats with cloth trim and contrast stitching, full instrument cluster with tachometer, center console and optional AM/FM stereo with cassette, optional AC and sport steering wheel. Everything was compact and efficient, typical of Japanese trucks, but the sport trim added a splash of character. It wasn't luxurious, but it felt driver-focused, especially compared to bare-bones base models. In 1982, the Courier Sport was a solid option for buyers who wanted a compact truck with style, but it didn't set the market on fire for several reasons. Price creep. It cost more than base models, without major performance gains. Image confusion. Some buyers weren't sure if it was a serious truck or a toy. Fading appeal of rebadged imports. By 1982, buyers were growing weary of badge-engineered vehicles. Additionally, Ford was preparing to launch the Ranger, a domestic compact pickup that would render the Courier instantly obsolete. As a result, the 1982 Courier Sport was a one-year-only footnote in Ford's truck evolution. Quickly replaced, barely remembered. Number 3, the 1963 Ford F-250 Camper Special Highboy, a towering, overbuilt brute from the golden era of heavy-duty pickups. The early 1960s marked a shift in how Americans viewed pickup trucks. No longer just bare-bones farm tools, trucks were becoming dual-purpose machines, workhorses on weekdays and recreational haulers on weekends. As camping culture exploded, automakers raced to offer vehicles capable of carrying massive slide-in campers. Enter the Ford F-250 Camper Special Highboy, a heavy-duty, tall-riding monster built to carry not just gear, but entire mobile homes on its back. The 1963 F-250 Highboy wasn't flashy or fast, but it was engineered with brute strength, high ground clearance, and big block power, making it one of the toughest, most capable Ford trucks of its time. It's a piece of history often overlooked, but essential to understanding the transition from work trucks to lifestyle vehicles. The term highboy didn't officially appear in Ford brochures. It was a nickname coined by enthusiasts and mechanics to describe a very specific configuration. Divorce transfer case. Instead of being bolted directly to the transmission, the transfer case was mounted separately with its own short drive shaft. This required increased ride height. To accommodate the added drivetrain length and function, these trucks sat higher than standard models. Factory lift look. With their tall stance, solid front axle, and long leaf springs, highboys looked lifted straight from the factory floor. Although Ford didn't officially use the highboy name, the 1963 F-250 4x4 in camper special trim embodied everything the term stood for. A tall, heavy-duty truck built for serious loads and tough terrain. By the early 1960s, slide-in truck campers had become wildly popular. They allowed families to explore America without towing a trailer. But these early campers were heavy, often tipping the scales at over 2,000 pounds fully loaded. Ford responded with the Camper Special Package, which included extra heavy-duty springs, upgraded rear axle, Dana 60, wiring harnesses for camper power, extended side mirrors for better visibility, reinforced frame and bed floor. On top of that, the F-250 Camper Special Highboy's elevated stance gave it better ground clearance and improved load capacity, perfect for off-the-grid camping before RV parks were common. This wasn't just a pickup, it was a mobile base camp. The 1963 F-250 camper, Special Highboy, came standard with Ford's tough-as-nails inline-six, but the real muscle came from optional big-block V8's FE series engines, like the 352 and later the 390 cubic-inch V8, rated at 200 to 250 horsepower, but more importantly, massive torque, ideal for hauling a camper up a mountain pass. These engines weren't about speed, they were about grunt, durability, and pulling power. When mated to the available 4-speed manual transmission with Granny Low and the 4-wheel drive system, this truck could climb just about anything, fully loaded. The 1963 F-250 wore the conservative but clean design of the 4th-generation F-Series, 1961 to 1966. Unibody look, although Ford dropped the true unibody by 63 due to flexing issues. Slab-sided profile, wide grille, minimal chrome, steel beds and solid axles. Camper special badge, dealer or factory applied. Its tall ride height, beefy tires, and extended mirrors made it stand out in any parking lot, even among full-size trucks. This was a vehicle that looked serious because it was. Driving a 1963 F-250 Highboy was not for the faint of heart. No power steering, manual brakes, truck-like ride quality, even by 1960s standards. It was loud, it was bouncy, and the gear ratios were tractor-like. But it could climb a steep trail, carry a camper the size of a studio apartment, and shrug off abuse for decades. It demanded respect and rewarded drivers with legendary durability. Despite its utility, the 1963 F-250 camper, Special Highboy, was never a mass-market truck. Heavy-duty buyers were a small subset of truck customers. Many were worked into the ground and never preserved. Later Ford trucks, especially the 1973 to 1979 F-Series, overshadowed these earlier models in collector circles. The popularity of trailers and motorhomes reduced demand for slide-in campers. As a result, these tall, big-block beasts have largely vanished from public memory and from roads. Number 2, the 1957 Ford Ranchero with 312 V8, the stylish pioneer that blurred the line between car and truck, launching a new segment before fading into obscurity. In 1957, Ford took a bold step into uncharted territory. It created something nobody else in the American market had dared to do: combine the comfort and style of a full-size car with the utility of a pickup truck. The result was the Ford Ranchero, a vehicle that didn't quite fit into any box because it was the box. While Chevrolet would later launch its own version, the El Camino in 1959, Ford's Ranchero came first, and with its top-trim 312 cubic-inch V8 engine, the 1957 Ranchero was more than a utility coupe. It was a sleeper muscle car with a bed. The 1950s saw America booming with suburban growth, weekend getaways, and rising consumerism. Households now owned more cars, traveled more, and bought things in larger quantities. And as farmers, ranchers, and small business owners looked for practical vehicles, they wanted something that could work during the week and still look good on Sunday. Ford listened and answered with a radical new idea. More than a car, more than a truck. The Ranchero wasn't just a marketing gimmick, it was a calculated innovation. The 1957 Ranchero was not based on a truck chassis. Unlike Ford's F-Series, the Ranchero was built on the two-door station wagon platform, specifically the custom 300 series. Key design elements: long, low, wide stance. It looked more like a Fairlane coupe than a pickup. Integrated cargo box rather than a bolted-on bed, the Ranchero had a smooth transition from cab to bed. Sleek tail fins and wraparound windshield. Pure 50s style, it had a stylish chrome grille, full-length body lines, and upscale trim options, making it stand out from traditional utility vehicles. To the untrained eye, it was just a cool two-door car, until you noticed the pickup bed. The Ranchero could be had with several engine options, but the top dog was the 312 cubic-inch Y-block V8, also used in the Thunderbird and Ford sedans. Specs of the 312 V8: rated up to 245 horsepower, with 4-barrel carb and dual exhaust. Solid torque curve, perfect for hauling, optional 4-matic automatic transmission or 3-speed manual with overdrive. In essence, this made the Ranchero a Thunderbird-powered hauler. It was fast, it could tow, and it didn't sacrifice comfort or road manners. This was no stripped-down utility truck. It was a gentleman's pickup and one of the earliest examples of a performance lifestyle vehicle. Unlike most work trucks of the time, the 1957 Ranchero offered deluxe interiors with full upholstery, non-optional heater, radio, and power steering, color choices and chrome trim options, a 6-foot steel bed with a 1,200-pound payload, rivaling many small pickups. This made the Ranchero perfect for tradesmen, ranchers, and small-town professionals who needed utility without sacrificing image or comfort. The 1957 Ranchero sold over 21,000 units in its first year, a respectable figure for such an unconventional vehicle. Its success caught Chevrolet off guard, prompting them to develop the El Camino, which wouldn't debut until 1959. Yet by the early 1960s, Ford began repositioning the Ranchero as a smaller, Falcon-based vehicle, shrinking it down and turning it into more of an economy hauler. By the 1970s, it became a bloated Torino-based GT coupe truck hybrid, far removed from its elegant origins. Ford discontinued the Ranchero entirely after 1979 and never looked back, even as the El Camino continued in various forms until 1987. The 1957 Ranchero is historically significant because it created an entirely new vehicle segment, the car truck. It offered V8 performance with real-world utility long before SUVs existed. It paved the way for lifestyle utility vehicles, including later icons like El Camino, Subaru Brat, Dodge Rampage, and modern crossover trucks like the Hyundai Santa Cruz. But despite being the first, the Ranchero rarely gets the credit it deserves. Ford never revived the name, and unlike the El Camino, it hasn't developed the same cult following, though it certainly deserves one. Today, the 1957 Ranchero is rare and highly collectible, especially with the 3.12 V8. Sought after for its styling, history, and uniqueness. A favorite among hot rodders and customizers. Many are turned into mild street rods or restored for car shows. In a world now full of crossover SUVs, the original Ranchero feels oddly prophetic. A car-based vehicle that could work hard and look good doing it. Number 1, the 1961 Ford Econoline pickup. A cab-over oddball that tried to reinvent the American pickup, but fell short due to its own quirks. In the early 1960s, Ford released one of its most unusual vehicles, the 1961 Ford Econoline pickup. It was short, flat-nosed, forward control, and looked like a cross between a VW bus and a Tonka toy. It had no front hood, the engine was under the floor, and the driver sat practically on top of the front axle. It was designed to maximize space, efficiency, and affordability, but what it gained in novelty, it lost in practicality and safety. Though never a major seller, the Econoline pickup became a symbol of mid-century automotive experimentation, and a cult classic for collectors and hot rodders today. By the late 1950s, Detroit was starting to pay attention to compact vehicles. The Volkswagen Type 2 Transporter microbus was selling well with urban tradesmen, and Americans were slowly warming up to smaller, more efficient platforms. Ford responded with the Falcon compact car in 1960 and immediately saw success. From that success came the Econoline line, which reused Falcon mechanicals in creative new ways, including the Econoline van, the Econoline pickup. The idea was simple: use a compact unibody platform and rearrange everything to save space. With the cab-over engine layout, you got more cargo room and less overall length, a win for tight city streets and light hauling. But as we'll see, engineering compromises came fast and hard. The 1961 Econoline pickup was like nothing else on the road. Key features: cab-over engine, COE, layout, no hood. The driver sat above the front axle, and the engine was under a box between the seats. Flat-faced front, Inspired by the VW Transporter, but with Ford's distinct styling, unibody construction, no traditional frame, more car-like, lighter, and cheaper. 7-foot bed with integrated sides and tailgate. Side-loading bed access due to the rear wheels intruding into the cargo area. It was essentially a van chassis with a bed grafted on, making it one of the earliest American cab-forward pickups. Engine and drivetrain, 144 cubic inch inline-six from the Falcon. Only 85 horsepower notch rear-wheel drive, 3-speed manual transmission. Later models upgraded to the 170 6, but even then, it wasn't fast or powerful. Still, the engine placement gave it a quirky charm, like a rear mid-engine pickup, sort of. Despite its oddball appearance, the Econoline pickup had several selling points. Short overall length for tight city work. Great visibility with its big windshield and high seating position, large bed relative to footprint. Very affordable, cheaper than most full-size trucks. Low load height made it easy to toss things into the bed. It appealed to small businesses, tradesmen, and delivery services who didn't need big V8 power, but appreciated maneuverability and low operating costs. Unfortunately, the Econoline pickup's novel layout created a laundry list of problems. Safety issues. No front crumple zone. You were the crumple zone. In a crash, the driver took the hit, fuel tank under the cab floor, right under your seat. No power steering or brakes. Ever. It was strictly manual everything. Handling, extremely front heavy. Over 60% of the weight sat on the front axle. This caused understeer, nosediving, and rapid tire wear. A full load in the rear could help, but empty, it was twitchy and unpredictable. Maintenance. Accessing the engine meant removing the doghouse inside the cab. Hot, awkward, and noisy. These issues made it less desirable for families or mainstream buyers. It was a niche work tool, not a lifestyle pickup. From 1961 to 1967, Ford sold the Econoline pickup in modest numbers. It found limited success in urban fleets and with tradesmen, but it was outclassed in towing and payload by even small full-size trucks. It was too quirky for the mainstream, and safety concerns eventually caught up with it. By 1967, Ford had had enough. They ended production of the pickup, though the van version would evolve into the full-size Econoline van that remained in production through 2014.